And we want to get to breaking news now. The Seattle mayor, as we said, was going to begin speaking about the homeless crisis, and we're going to listen in right now.
I made in a speech I gave last night. As you know, I spoke at Mary's Place about the crisis of homelessness and our efforts to deliver services to people living in homeless encampments and our work to protect public safety. As I spoke, a terrible act of violence occurred in one of those encampments, an encampment that has been a problem for decades. The tragedy only serves to emphasize the points I made last night, the points I made in November when I declared a state of emergency. As I said, the reasons for homelessness are complex, and ending homelessness in this city or any city in America will not be easy, and it will not happen quickly. There are, as I have said, no simple solutions. Too often, we think about this as a Seattle problem without a Seattle solution, but each night in this country, over 500,000 people are homeless and 200,000 sleep on our streets. That's nationwide. A week doesn't go by that I do not speak with the mayor from somewhere in the West Coast or in this state about the growing crisis of homelessness in their city. Most recently, in the last few days, the city of Bellingham asked the governor to declare a statewide state of emergency on the issue of homelessness. It's just simply larger than any one city can handle by itself. When you look at the level of cuts to federal affordable housing, and as I've said many times, we've lost 1/3 of our housing funds from the federal government, affordable housing funds, in the last 5 years. When you look at the growing income inequality, a state that is number 2 in the number of people who are mentally ill and near the bottom in providing access to treatment for mental health, and again, a heroin epidemic that is massive and is across the country and mostly has been unaddressed. Seattle, since the state of emergency, has expanded emergency shelters, I've listed them off several times to you, permitted legal encampments, opened safe lots for people who are living in their vehicles and not involved in criminal behavior. We are currently providing, and this is just the city's part, not the county's, 2,000 spaces every night for people. That's a 20% increase in 1 year. We are also bringing new services to the streets. We are starting a mobile medical van that will move throughout the city, offering mental health treatment, substance abuse treatment, and access to medical care. Emergency responses, short-term fixes, are not going to solve the problem. And regrettably, the debate in this city has focused only on short-term strategies. As I said last night, and as I said in November, there are significant parts of our delivery system that is broken. We have some pretty incredible programs that do incredible things, but our system is fragmented. The U.S. government has pointed this out for many, many years, that we do not fund programs that actually result in people entering into permanent housing. We have to change that. Otherwise, we won't be able to change the situation, period. But we also can't change this situation unless the federal government and the state government, but particularly the federal government, steps back in and creates an affordable housing plan, as well as assists us with the issues of homelessness. We have seen since 1980, half of the funds from the federal government for affordable housing and homelessness disappear. At the same time, the tax breaks for folks who get high-end mortgages has increased 5 times. If these trends continue, Seattle can do all we can, but we won't be able to solve the problem. To provide emergency shelter for the 3,000 people who remain homeless on our streets would cost $49 million a year, and that would simply be for shelter services, not moving people out of homelessness permanently. We currently spend $50 million a year on homelessness. That is the largest amount in the history of this city. But I hear from some advocates and some in the council that we are not doing enough. So either we believe that we declared a state of emergency, as we would in an earthquake or a flood, because we need federal assistance and state aid, or we believe we can do this ourselves. If council wants to engage in a process, I'm willing to engage in a process to cut $49 million from programs in the city budget. That means sacrificing things we want to do for community centers, paid parental leave, repairing or building sidewalks in neighborhoods that don't have them. So we have to make a choice. It will also mean laying off hundreds and hundreds of state employees. Now, some will say raise taxes. I am proposing that we double the housing levy this year. So we're also doing that part. But we really have got to end this argument. Either we are going to pay for it, or we acknowledge that we are doing our part and that we as a city have other things that we need to do as well as work on homelessness, and unite in our effort to increase federal aid and state assistance. I said last night, and I'm going to reiterate a point again today, I absolutely do not accept that we cannot change this dialogue at the federal level. I absolutely don't accept it, and neither do the mayors of Los Angeles, Portland, or San Francisco. I also don't accept it because, you know, 10 years ago this day in Olympia, we passed the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender bill. 10 years ago, people thought that was not possible. Last night I talked about HIV/AIDS. Thousands of people were dying. It was an incredibly hostile period in our history, but we were able to change minds in Congress despite the inability of the president of the time to even say the word AIDS. We also did it in the state. The leader in funding state programs for HIV/AIDS was a Republican from Yakima, Washington. I just do not accept that we can't build a coalition in this nation to do something about homelessness. Their other claims have been that we are trying to conduct inhumane sweeps where all we do is force people out of unauthorized encampments. As I said last night, and I will say again, that is simply not true. First of all, we don't have the money to sweep 3,000 people off our streets, but more importantly, we are going in and we are offering services and we are actually moving people out. We're also cleaning up garbage and human waste and needles. Now, in some areas that are unsafe, we are actually moving people out, whether they will move out or not. Because as I said last night, and as I said in November, I believe it is inhumane to leave people in places such as the so-called jungle where they are murdered, and this is not the first murder, where they are raped and where they have no possibility of treatment. We have stories now that we go in pretty regularly of folks refusing treatment, refusing shelter. But you know, it seems to appear after 3 or 4 tries working with folks, they seem to be willing to come in eventually and accept treatment. It's not a perfect process, and I've heard criticisms of how the city's doing it. We're trying to perfect it. But I really have to tell you something. The individuals who are trying to work with people in these encampments, the city employees who are trying to do this business, basically are traumatized by what they're doing. They're compassionate and they're struggling, and I realize we make mistakes, but we'll continue to try and do that. Also, there's this myth that we were not enforcing the law. And as I said last night, that is simply not true. The chief can provide and has provided information that where we've actually made arrests in more than one time of folks involved in significant crime who are living in RVs. So again, these myths and running to our positions is solving nothing about homelessness. I guess I don't share the great intellectual capacity of some people in this city who think that they know the answer, that we simply leave people in filth and in dangerous places, or others who simply believe that the answer is to do sweeps and lock people up. I don't believe that's going to get us anywhere, and I don't believe, as I said last night, the discussions are particularly constructive. I'm not going to read the whole speech, but I did want to make a few remarks about that. Let me end by reiterating a point I made last night. You know, the folks who are out there in these encampments and who are sleeping on our streets are individuals who, either through economic collapse of their own income or the economy of this country, or because of addiction, are in a pretty bad place. What we hear is they basically have very, very little contact with anybody in their past life. Mostly they're not in contact with family members. They have nothing and they have no one. And as I said last night, anybody who's seen anyone or known anyone who is mentally ill or in the grips of addiction knows how destructive that life is to those individuals. And you also know that it takes a whole lot of work to get those individuals in a place where they can stabilize their lives and get off the street. And I would hope as we go forward as a city, we would keep that in mind. So let me reiterate. We're going to continue to offer services. We're going to continue to expand services. We're going to continue to enforce the law, and we are going to continue to, at least I am, acknowledge that Seattle has stepped up, and has stepped up big time. And it is time, again, for the federal government and the state to step up. You will now hear from Chief O'Toole, who will give us an update on the investigation. Chief Scoggins will give us an update on the assessment that the county executive and the governor and I agreed to last night. Also available for questions is Catherine Lester, the director of our Human Service Department, and Scott Kubley, the director of our Transportation Department. And with that, Chief O'Toole.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, I'll preface my comments by saying this is an active and ongoing investigation. We're absolutely committed to getting as much information out to the community as possible, but we're certainly not going to undermine the integrity of the investigation. As indicated earlier, we have a number of witnesses and eyewitnesses, eyewitnesses and also other witnesses who are in the general vicinity. Homicide investigators commenced their interviews within minutes of the incident last night and have continued to work throughout the night, throughout the course of the day. They attended the 2 autopsies that were conducted earlier today, and as we speak here, they continue to conduct interviews of witnesses that were there last night. The medical examiner has released the identity of the 2 victims. I'm sure that many of you have access to that, but that they are first a white male, white female, date of birth 11/14/70. Her name is Jean L. Zapata, Z-A-P-A-T-A. And the male victim was an Asian male, date of birth 5/24/82, and his name is James Q. Tran. 3 other victims remain in the hospital. I understand that 2 of them have been upgraded to stable condition, and 1 remains in critical condition. The detectives are continuing the interviews this afternoon, as I mentioned. At this point, we definitely believe that the shooting is related to low-level drug dealing. There was some speculation about that earlier in the day. The investigators feel strongly that that's probably the case, but again, we always have to keep open minds in this type of investigation, and we will continue to review the forensic evidence that we recovered at the scene, including a significant amount of ballistic evidence. I want to thank the SPD officers who responded to the scene, the investigators who've worked through the night and through the day. They've done an incredible job to date. I want to thank the fire department for their extraordinary response last night. we're very fortunate to have a fire department with the capability, the professionalism of the SFD. We were assisted last night by King County Sheriff's deputies and also by the Washington State Patrol. And ATF actually responded to the scene last night with their K-9 and investigators to help us collect ballistic evidence that is going to be reviewed. So it's been a great team effort from a law enforcement perspective. Our goal is to bring people to justice for this horrific crime, and we'll continue to provide information on the SPD blotter, and we'll continue to do briefings as appropriate as information becomes available. But at the end of the day, you know, it's important that we maintain the integrity of our investigation. Thank you very much.
And that was the Chief of Police, Kathleen O'Toole, and also the Seattle Mayor, Ed Murray, talking.
First off,
we're going to continue to move on here. I want to clear up a couple key points. At the beginning of the newscast, we were given the name of the female victim as Janina L. Brooks, and we've just heard in that news conference from the Chief of Police, Gina L. Zapata. So we do have some people working on that right now to confirm which that is. And a couple other key takeaways: 3,000 homeless people. Mayor Murray suggesting doubling down on the housing levy to address this problem, to get some extra funding, also asking for help from the state and the feds. He says if not, we may need to cut $49 million in city programs to address this problem, which he says has just mushroomed out of control.
And they said they already spend about $50 million a year just to maintain the homeless population, the homeless services right now. But in order to expand that, they really need a lot more money to do more services. So that's the call he's putting out to the state, to the governor, also the feds as well. So it'll be an issue that he discusses with the city council, and obviously we'll be learning a lot more and pass that along. For now, we're going to take a short break. Back with more news right after this.